If you had to choose which is more important, would it be investing or paying off debt? Today, we're going to be talking about some key questions you should be asking yourself when you decide. The answer may shock you. Hi, I'm Joseph.
And I'm Tasha with One Big Happy Life, and we make videos about how to find balance, build wealth, and live happy. Everything that you need to create the life that you want.
Today, we're going to be talking about investing versus paying off debt. But first, I want to invite you over to our free live masterclass, The Money Mastery Plan, how to save money, pay off debt faster, without having to give up the things that you love.
Now, this class is happening later this week and will only be available for a short time. So be sure to head on over to onebighappylife.com/money plan to sign up. And we will be there sharing amazing strategies to help you build wealth today while also living a life that you love. And we'll be there answering questions live. So you don't want to miss this free class. Head on over to onebighappylife.com/money plan to join us live.
Now, general wisdom in the personal finance world says that paying off debt is the default thing to do if you have any debt at all. And not only paying it off, but paying it off really fast by sacrificing all of their financial goals and just doing that first.
Now, and that's also one of the questions that we get the most. Like, it's not the number one question. The number one question has to do with like budgeting and reconciling your budget. But the number two question has to be, if we have all of these assets, which we do, why don't we just liquidate them all and pay off all of our debts so that we can be debt-free? Like Joseph said, debt freedom is often put as the gold standard in personal finance, but the reality is, like we like to remind people, no one's actual ultimate goal is debt freedom. That's a preliminary goal. Everyone is looking for financial freedom, which means having so much money that you can stop working, aka retirement, aka financial independence. But we thought we would take some time to work through this question about which is better, saving versus paying off debt.
Okay, first, let's start with some assumptions. We're going to assume that in this scenario, you have some debt and you have some income, enough income that you get to decide whether or not you're going to invest with it or whether or not you're going to pay additional payments or additional principal against the debts that you have. So minimum payments are being met already.
So first, let's start with the pros and the cons of each, starting with the pros of paying off debt. So obviously, if you focus on paying off debt as your priority, you will pay off your debt faster, which many people point out has a psychological benefit. Now, the caveat that we want to give here when it comes to the psychological benefit is that we see a psychological benefit. We feel stressed about debt because we are told to feel stressed about debt. Look at it this way. We all will be paying electric bills for the rest of our lives. Electricity is going to be a thing. Most of us have no aspirations to go off the grid. And yet no one's sitting there saying, oh my gosh, my electric bill. Like, not people who have surplus income who are able to meet all of their financial obligations. They're not like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a ball and chain on me for the rest of my life. So why do people look at a $200, say, roof payment or mortgage payment any differently than a $200 electric bill? It's because of a mindset issue. It's a societal thing that's ingrained in us to think that one type of payment is worse than another type of payment. So we just want to point out, so while there are psychological benefits and people do talk about debt being stressful, it's largely a result of societal influence on us about how we look at our debts. Because I can guarantee you, Joseph and I are not sitting there like, oh my gosh, these debts, how are we going to? Because we have a debt payoff plan in place and we're comfortable with our financial plan.
Another pro is purely math. It is you will pay less interest over time if you pay your debts off faster. That's going to happen. If you have less debt, there is going to be less interest. And that's just about it. But as you're making those payments, you're not going to be saving as much interest as you get deeper and deeper into those loans. So like right now, you're paying a lot of interest on say your mortgage, but it starts to get just to be a little bit of interest at the end. So depending on where you are in your loan life, you might be saving a lot of interest, or you might actually not be saving that much interest at all.
And then the caveat on the interest thing is people just look at the amount of interest that you pay on the debt, but they don't look at how much you could earn in compound interest over time if you invested that money. So in terms of wealth building, which is the goal, sometimes it may be that it's better to go ahead and pay more interest on a debt so that you can use the money to earn even more interest in investing. So that's just the caveat on that pro.
Another thing is that the goal of paying off debt is cut and dry. It's very easy to target. You have a balance on a credit card, let's say, and you want to make that go down to zero. It's really simple to understand. There's not a lot of back and forth about, well, exactly how do I measure my goal? It's there right for you.
Not to mention that it's an easier goal. Like just straight up paying off your mortgage is easier than saving enough money for retirement, because for most of us, and you will need more money for retirement than your mortgage costs. And so it's easier to aim for that because it's frankly a shorter term goal than investing for the long term so that you can reach financial independence.
Okay, now let's talk about a few of the downsides of paying your debt off as fast as you can. So the first thing is you're actually going to pay more in tax depending on which debts you have. So let's say you have some student loans and a mortgage. Well, interest on a student loan is deductible to a point, and on a mortgage, the same is true. And so you're actually going to be paying a little bit more in taxes because you aren't paying as much interest.
The next thing is that if you are paying off debt faster, it may result in you having less assets, which we talked about earlier, because obviously money that you are paying out, you're not keeping, you're not using to build your emergency fund, you're not investing. And so you may lose out on extra interest that you could have earned and built wealth faster by paying off debt.
Not to mention, it's not just the assets, but liquid assets. Because if your option is investing, well, the stock market, bonds, or cash, CDs, even that, it's relatively liquid. You can move it in, move it out if you need to access it. But once you give that money to a debt collector, well, they don't give it back to you. It's much harder to then make decisions if you need more money.
The next thing is that aggressively paying off your debt does cause you to put your other financial goals on hold and can make them more expensive. So in last week's video, we talked about how if you start saving when you're 20, you have to save half as much as if you start saving when you're 30. So while paying off debt faster might seem like an admirable goal, it may actually make your overarching goal, which is financial freedom, a little bit harder to obtain because you lose that time of your money sitting in the market and growing and working for you.
All right, now let's look at the investing side of things, starting off with the advantages. So number one, I'll go with taxes again. There are major tax advantages to investing, especially for retirement, because there are tax advantaged accounts. You can deduct a huge portion of your income, up to $19,000 this year. If you're contributing to an employer plan, I mean, that's a lot less tax that you could be paying.
It's also worth noting that retirement accounts like a 401k are typically exempt from creditor claims. So when you put your money in there, it's pretty safe. And like I mentioned before, the earlier you start saving, the less money you need to come up with in order to hit your big goals. So prioritizing investing makes saving for your biggest goal, which is financial freedom, that much easier.
Another advantage is you are gaining liquid assets. Now, I'm going to assume that you're not going to be investing in just real estate, but that you're going to go into some stocks, into some bonds, those kinds of things. And so that gives you some liquidity. If you need to tap into that for an emergency, I mean, a real big emergency, you can do that because there's a market already out there to sell and buy as you need to.
The other major the other major pro is true financial peace of mind. There is nothing, absolutely nothing better than knowing that you have enough money to fund your expenses for the rest of your life. And that can include also funding your debts. And we've done a video where we featured someone that retired in his 30s with debt, but his nest egg was large enough to still cover his mortgage. So he didn't have to worry about paying off his mortgage, but he was done working, living a carefree life, traveling months out of the year with his family, including children. There's no better feeling than being financially independent.
Now, the key to investing is really generating some passive income or passive wealth building. And so if you're doing that, you don't have to worry as much about your day-to-day working. Now, I mean, of course, it's the goal eventually for retirement for you to just do whatever you want. You don't have to work at all. But even in the interim, you know that you've got some money that is being generated if you need to tap into it, or if you've got some non-retirement accounts, it can add to your income.
All right, so now let's talk about the cons of investing, starting with the fact that yes, it is absolutely possible to lose money. I mean, we're all not that removed from 2008 when there was that huge market crash and a lot of people lost a lot of money. So yes, when you are investing, there is a certain amount of risk there. But the thing to keep in mind is that the market has since rebounded. And if you had stayed the course and kept your money in those investments, you would have made your money back and then some over the past 10 years.
Yeah, what that's really called is the volatility. And so in the short term, this is the scary part for the stock market. In the short term, it can go up and down wildly. And that is scary because the day that you invest your money, you might lose a big portion of it. But what is really important is the volatility over the long term for stocks trends upwards. And that is what you're actually tapping into when you're investing early.
Another con is investing is not straightforward. We all know how to pay off debt. It's just like paying another bill. The minute you learned how to pay your electric bill or your rent bill, you learned how to pay off debt. But investing, there's more involved there. You have to learn about how investments work. You have to learn about different financial products like ETFs, 401ks, all of those things. And so, yes, there's a bit of a learning curve, but you can learn these things. We promise you. And we share all of that information and knowledge with you here on YouTube, over on our website. And then we go even deeper in our program, Wealth Builders Academy. So you can learn these things.
Last, you are definitely going to be paying some type of fees to invest. If it's with your employer, the employer plan will have some fees. Maybe they're built in and you don't exactly know what they are, but trust me, they're there. Somebody's paying something. Hopefully it's your employer. If you have a private account, you'll see some fees. There might be fees to trade individual stocks. You got to watch out for those. So that's a level of complexity and cost that is definitely going to be there with investing.
And the last major con when it comes to investing is there's no instant gratification. I know it may not seem like it, but paying off debt is very much like instant gratification because you can see those balances go down day after day and you can see that progress in a shorter period of time. When you're investing, you're in it for the long haul. For most of us, we're looking at decades to reach those goals. And so it is like the very definition of stay the course. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And for a lot of people, we haven't learned how to master staying the course. We're used to instant gratification. And so mentally, it can be very difficult. So it's all about, you can, of course, counteract that with your mental mindset and knowing that you're doing what's best for your financial future by investing. Kind of like how you brush your teeth so you can have your teeth in your 60s, you save so that you can retire whenever you want to. It doesn't even have to be your 60s.
Okay, so which is better after all those pros and cons? Well, if you know, there's a little bit of a lean towards investing, but it's not so cut and dry. It kind of goes back and forth depending on your situation a little bit.
So we're going to give you some overall kind of general principles that you can consider as you're making this decision for yourself. So number one, if you get employer matching, you typically want to start investing and get that employer matching because when you get employer matching, that is a 100% return on your investment. I don't care how high your debts are, chances are like it's sort should be illegal for you to have debts with an interest rate of 100%. So clearly you are earning wealth faster by at least getting the employer matching.
Next, we're going to flip to the payoff debt side if the interest rate is over 7%, because that is a high enough rate that, especially in the short term, you probably aren't going to beat it, or not with any real certainty, if you're investing. And so that means you'll be losing wealth because that interest is just too much.
And we say functionally 7%. So what that means is if you're participating in a student loan repayment program, if you have a mortgage that's tax deductible, take all of those things into consideration and calculate the real interest rate when you're making that decision. And then next, you switch over to investing to max out until you hit your minimum savings rate. And your minimum savings rate is the minimum amount that you need to put away every single month in order to hit your target financial independence date.
Then, after you have that minimum, switch back over and go ahead and pay off those debts. Because once you get that minimum savings rate, well, your retirement's locked up. So you can go ahead and move on, and then there's no reason to be paying less on those debts. Just get rid of them.
And so you know that we love giving you real world, real life examples using ourselves as guinea pigs. So we went ahead and did the math for you guys using 3 different scenarios. So in the first scenario, we did what we're currently doing, which is slow paying our lower interest debt and prioritizing investing. At our current savings rate, assuming we keep our current house, our net worth at 65 will be $14 million, and that includes the value of the house. Here we assumed an 8% rate of return, and we assumed that the value of our house would grow at about 3%, which is what real estate has averaged historically.
Now, if we liquidated everything to pay off all of our debts,
which a lot of people ask us to do, they're like, you should do this,
oh yeah,
of course.
Sell our house, get rid of all of our investments. I would say every single week somebody's asking, why don't we do that? Well, here's why. We would only have $7 million at age 66. If you notice, that's about half.
And we'd also be saving more money every single month because all the money that was going to our mortgage would now be going towards savings. So we'd almost double our savings rate and still end up with half as much wealth over the same period of time.
Next, let's look at a scenario where we reduce the amount that we are investing to the employer match minimum, and then use that money to pay off our mortgage.
Like the extra money.
So it does a little bit better, $10.5 million, but still clearly significantly less than what we're doing now.
I mean, what could you do with an extra $3.5 million? I mean, I can think of so many things. It would buy so many lash extensions, I tell you. Obviously, I'm joking. But the point is that when you do the math, and we are all about the math, oftentimes it will end up that it's actually better to slow pay your debts, especially in a low interest rate environment when you have a lot of interest, when your interest rates are below 5%. All of ours are actually below like 3.5%. So it just does not make sense to prioritize paying off debt. But of course, this can vary from situation to situation, which is why we love giving you the tools to help you figure out what's going to make most sense for you.
If you found this helpful, then definitely check out our free live masterclass, the Money Mastery Plan, at onebighappylife.com/money plan.
I'll see you next week.
Bye.